Good morning and welcome to your TVC News here in Clarence-Rockland. It's Friday the 12th of February. My name is Thomas Stockting and thank you for joining me as we bring you your latest regional update. In your headlines this week, local COVID update as the lockdown is set to end. Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus review the long-term care facilities. 10,000 meals to be delivered to those struggling across the region. And the Green Party is searching for a local candidate. With the local COVID numbers decreasing across Ontario, the provincial government is starting to allow regions to come out of lockdown. Locally, we are set to come out of our lockdown in early next week. However, Dr. Paul Roumeliotis of the Eastern Ontario Health Unit urged residents to remain cautious.
The bottom line is that for the majority of health units, with the exception of Toronto, next week after Family Day, the 16th, pending our numbers this week, which will be reevaluated tomorrow, pending our numbers, we will, or this health unit will end up where those numbers indicate. So if we're at red tomorrow, we will be red as of next week. If we're orange moving forward, we will be in orange of next week. Now, each one of those has different restrictions. Obviously, red has more restrictions than orange. There's a difference between in-room dining and not dining, so there's a few differences there. However, we had a meeting with the Chief Medical Officer of Health today before the announcement was made, and there are going to be some additional restrictions for each of those zones. So we're not really sure what they look like. We were told that we should be getting those between now and in the next couple of days. What they will be doing is they will be looking at the data every Tuesday, making recommendations to a cabinet on Wednesday and Thursday. Decisions will be made and announcements will be made Friday for moving forward. So formally this week, what's going to happen is they're going to review our data tomorrow based on the numbers. Again, at this point, we're red, bordering on maybe an orange, depending on the total numbers, but we're certainly in the red area, approaching orange. If our numbers start to get lower between now and tomorrow, perhaps we'll be clear in the orange. But again, that's the ministry to decide. We'll look at that, and then they will make a decision and announcements on the 12th. And should we, as of the 15th, only as of the 15th. Although the emergency declaration will be allowed to expire on the 9th, tomorrow, the stay-at-home order stays into effect until the 16th. So make it clear, for now, for this week, up until the 16th, it is status quo for the Eastern Ontario Health Unit area. And we are awaiting right now the direction, for the final decision, looking at the numbers as to how we end up. Again, whatever restriction we will end up with, there may be additional restrictions. Obviously, suggesting to stay home as much as possible. It won't be an order anymore. Obviously, interprovincial and interregional travel will not be allowed, and so on. So those are the type of things that we're seeing. One of the caveats and one of the things that we want to be very careful about, really, it has to do with the variants of concern. And the variants of concern, really, we know that they are 1.5 times more contagious than the regular virus, the original form of the virus. We now have seen that was over 200 cases that are positive in Ontario. Nothing in our area yet, but it's only a matter of time. We are quite concerned about that, so it would be very important that moving forward, we really have to balance between being extremely careful, social distancing, masking, and so on, increase instructions and increase prudence with positive cases and contacts and so on, because it's a balance. It's a balance, and obviously there will be a regional approach. So by regional, we mean that. And the green ones will open this week. The remainder, with the exception of GTA, will open next week, and GTA will likely open on the 22nd. Again, based on the numbers. There's also going to be what they call emergency brake. So if we see, for example, VOCs in the area, or if we see increased outbreaks or increased numbers, we will go back into the shutdown. So again, mechanisms of those were just described to us very briefly today. But moving forward, we will be keeping a close eye on that and be very, very careful, again, extremely careful as to some of the reopenings that we should be doing to ensure that people do understand that at any given time, if we start seeing a relapse of the numbers, that we'll go back into shutdown. So it's quite important that we do this slowly but surely. And again, we will be sharing as much as possible, as early as possible when we get them, if there are going to be any additional restrictions to the red, orange, and yellow zones that the ministry talked to us about this morning.
As you just heard, local numbers will be reassessed on a weekly basis, and restrictions can be loosened further if they continue to diminish. At the time of recording in Prescott-Russell, there are currently 38 active cases, of which only 8 are in Clarence-Rockland. COVID-19 testing centres in Prescott-Russell are undergoing changes as the EOHU have ramped up their vaccine effort. The centre in Castleman will no longer be at the EOHU office, but has moved to 710 Principal Street and will now be operated by staff from the Hawkesbury General Hospital. At-risk residents of long-term care facilities and retirement homes in the region continue to receive their vaccines, and some local long-term care facilities will soon get their second dose as well. However, Dr. Roumeliotis did say that they will not be vaccinating any staff members, even those who received the first dose a few weeks ago. The Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus recently published a review into municipally owned long-term care facilities to ensure that the care being provided is as good as it can be. Debbie Robinson, the chair of the caucus, and Kelly Pender, who was the technical lead on the project, explained the areas identified for improvement, as well as the effect the pandemic has had on the system and the residents.
An evolving institution. So in 2012, the province instituted an aging in place strategy, which meant that, and I think we all agree that seniors aging in their homes is the best possible scenario. But that also put pressure on long-term care homes, and people were coming to long-term care in a far frailer condition than they were a decade ago. So the average length of stay has gone from 4 and 5 years to under 2 years. So it's really put pressure on the system. Obviously, we're an aging demographic, so there's more people in line. You know, waiting times for municipal homes in Eastern Ontario are larger than for private and not-for-profit homes. We're seen as the home of choice. And that puts pressure on our staff, and particularly staff that have been there a long time. Their jobs have changed a fair bit. You know, they've gone from recreation programs and providing comfort to things like feeding tubes, and behavioral issues are huge. Also things just like bariatric patients. The entire service delivery has changed in a decade, and the industry itself hasn't kept up with that. And like a lot of things, the pandemic didn't change that, it just sped it up. And it exposed our weaknesses. And I think that's what we've been able to do with this report, is to document what was wrong before and what's happened to make it even worse right now.
So that was one of the things I was actually going to ask you about. You said there's been this change where people are maybe coming into homes a little bit later, and you said the kind of care that's being provided has changed as well. It's almost become a little bit more palliative to a certain extent. So you're saying there's been this change over a longer period of time. What kind of problems have really been amplified or exemplified by the latest pandemic?
Yeah, I think probably behavioral issues is near the top. Obviously, we're getting later stage dementia patients, for example, and dementia can appear in a number of different forms. It can make people more passive, or it can make people more aggressive. And in many homes, many municipal homes, 25% of our beds have been designated for more intensive care purposes, and those higher needs units aren't adequate anymore. There's more demand than there is supply. and it's putting more pressure on staff. Obviously, resident to resident kinds of things and resident to staff. And I think the other thing that's changed is family dynamics. We're all in a different state these days, and the needs of families have changed, and there's pressures because you can't go see your mom. And our workers are at the front line of that. And it's been really difficult all the way around.
And Debbie, how big an importance does the caucus place on being able to provide better care in long-term care homes? As Kelly just said about the importance of being able to see families, how important is this return to normality?
Oh, it's very important. And, right now we're in a situation where there's a lot of heartbreak happening in family units. Just recently I heard about a husband and wife who'd been married for 70 years. He ended up going in hospital. He was, about to pass away, and she was still in long-term care. And because of the pandemic and the risk, she could not go to say goodbye to her husband of 70 years. That's heartbreaking. And that's one story that I'm sharing with you, but there's many, many stories like that. And, and Kelly talked about people with dementia, having that family connection, seeing that your mom or your dad is so important, because, dementia is taking your parent away from you. And if you don't get to see your parent for a month or 2 months, they may never recognize you again. And it's heartbreaking. We have to do something about it. And I believe when we've met with Minister Fullerton, she is very, very supportive. She certainly shares our vision for, better long-term care result for anyone who does go into long-term care. And that's basically what we're going to be working with the province to make that happen. They've committed to the 4 hours of direct care per person per day. In our long-term care homes and the 15 ones that we operate, we're about an hour, on average, an hour away from that goal. So, we know the province is looking at 2024, 2025 for that to happen. We're going to try to push for that to be implemented much sooner and accelerate the whole system to make it better for everyone now.
Yeah, and obviously when you're looking at, the most vulnerable in our society and the amount of care that they need, and the fact that the care has changed, that's hugely important. We're also looking at structural things. Counties are really well placed to play a larger role in the delivery of services. And I'll shamelessly talk about Renfrew County and the community paramedicine program. They're getting paramedics out into the community to help seniors that before they arrive in long-term care, to have a more comfortable lifestyle at home, taking pressure off the system. Municipalities, we're involved in everything from housing and homelessness to paramedicine, to a number of different programs, and taking that more holistic view, I think, places municipalities in a really good location. On the other side, there's the more, and I'll use the word bureaucratic things, like the current funding formula just doesn't make sense anymore. The funding formula for 2021 is based upon data from 2019. And frankly, the residents from 2019 are no longer living in the home. I mean, it's an archaic system. We're saying fund it per bed. It makes sense across the globe, across the entire province, pardon me, and that it makes sense for us, rather than having RPNs and RNs doing massive documentation to calculate a formula that doesn't work by the time it gets to us. Just fund us by a bed. And municipalities in Eastern Ontario, we contribute about 30 million more than what the province contributes, in addition to what the province contributes. So we are taking local tax dollars and investing it, and our long-term care homes are the heart of our aging community, and we're proud of that. Those facilities, we're proud of the people that work there, and most importantly, we're proud of the residents that chose our homes to be, their final homes, and we take that seriously.
The federal elections are only a year away, as long as the snap election isn't called in the spring, of course. Locally, the Green Party of Canada is stepping up their search for a candidate to represent Glengarry, Prescott and Russell in the next election. We spoke to Claire Lemay, the CEO of the Green Party Electoral District Association, about what kind of person the party is looking for and how a candidate would benefit our region.
Having a Green Party candidate on the ballot provides an alternative voting option for residents in the riding. It enables those that share green values to be heard, and it gives residents a chance to vote their conscience. A vote for the Green Party tells the other parties what the people's priorities really are. And contrary to popular belief, voting aligned with your values is the most important way, really, to signal to the government what your priorities are. If this splits the progressive vote, then that might end up with us having a minority government. And this is actually beneficial, as the elected party will be required to collaborate with the other parties and will be challenged by the other parties, including the Green Party, in order to get their legislation passed. So having a minority government is the best way to ensure the government is held to account, and that's what Green MPs do.
And speaking of priorities, if a candidate is found in the area and they are elected, what would their priorities be for the municipality and, as I said, the region at large?
The priorities will obviously be determined by listening to the community. However, they'll also echo the priorities established by the Green Party of Canada. It's important for voters to know that these aren't just environmental priorities. Although that is a major focus, the Green Party has a platform that covers all areas, including social issues, everything from a just recovery from the pandemic, adequate and increased access to healthcare, including mental health, long-term care homes, and pharmacare, and also electoral reform. The Green Party has 6 core values on which its platform is based. These are sustainability, nonviolence, social justice, ecological wisdom, participatory democracy, and respect for diversity. As with all Green Party candidates and MPs, our local candidate will exemplify the green values: cooperation, collaboration, honesty, and civility.
As we know, one of the reasons why we're chatting today is because you are searching for a candidate. So what kind of person are you looking for to represent the area?
The nomination process is now open, so we're hoping to get some interest from a few different people. The type of person that we're looking for ideally will be a member of the community who supports and exemplifies the Green Party values, someone who's bilingual, who's eager and excited to speak with members of the community about the local issues, someone who's passionate and willing to put in the hard work that's required to campaign and to get votes.
And what kind of experience are you looking for someone to have in a potential candidate?
Ideally, it would be someone who's already involved in the community in some way, who has a bit of a public role, not necessarily someone who's been involved in politics before, but someone who is interested in being engaged in the community and who knows what the issues are for local residents.
And if they are interested, how can they get in touch?
The best way to get in touch with us is by email. Glengarry Prescott-Russell at greenparty.ca is our email address. And we also have Facebook and Instagram pages.
If you're interested, you can contact the Green Party on social media or through email at glengarryprescott.russell@greenparty.ca. 10,000 meals prepared by local chefs will be delivered to families in need across the region through their local food banks. The collaborative effort taking part in Prescott-Russell is an expansion of the Rotary Club, which started in Hawkesbury in 2020. We caught up with 2 of the spearheads behind this project, Agata Michalska of United Way Eastern Ontario and Lisa Deacon, who is the consultant on the project, to find out a little bit more.
So we estimate that in Ontario, there's 1 in 7 families that are in a situation of food insecurity. And since the pandemic began, in fact, United Way East Ontario has convened a table of partners to sort of look at the needs emerging from the pandemic. And basic needs and food insecurity was one of them. People who are experiencing inequities have just seen them exacerbated by the pandemic. And so it's really essential to sort of look at that from that perspective. And we also know that, access to food can have repercussions on for families and children, especially in terms of developing illnesses and conditions further on. So basic needs are extremely important. We've partnered with a number of collaborators here, and Lisa will be able to talk more about that. But really, it's that convening aspect of United Way that is important to bring up in this context.
And when we talk about some of the nicer meals being prepared by the chefs, now, why do you feel like it's necessary to not just have your basic, the basic 5 a day, what you need to sustain your body, versus actually having something that's maybe a little bit nicer as well?
Absolutely. So we know that mental health has come up, as one of the fallouts of the pandemic, right? The isolation that leads towards people feeling even more stressed than they were before. There's also a piece of that we talked about in terms of stigma, and so I'll let Lisa speak to that as well. But that is absolutely important, especially in a time where we are all feeling the, in different levels, of course, but we're feeling the crunch right now in terms of the pandemic weighing down on us. And when do we ask for help, and how is it's okay to ask for help?
So Lisa, I'll come towards you with this a continuation of this question then. Well, why do you feel like there's that stigma, and why do you feel like the chef meals are needed? I guess there's a side for the people who need the food, as well as maybe an economical side to this.
Absolutely. So to build on what Agatha was saying, a good meal, I think a lot of us associate connection with a good meal, sitting around a table with friends and family, sharing something that really fuels our body and soul. And I think that a lot of people are lacking connection with each other right now. So being able to send good meals out to, as Agatha was saying, families that are in need, as well as the elderly who may not always be able to cook for themselves and may not be able to spend time with their family lately. There's also that aspect of when a good meal arrives to your door, you feel cared for and connected with your community, even if you're not necessarily at the same dinner table as them. So we've heard that from a lot of people in the program, that it just makes their day, and that as they're eating, they're thinking about the people who put their time and energy into preparing those meals for them. We did a consultation. My work is really community-based and empathy-based. So we start with speaking with people who are experiencing food insecurity or have experienced food insecurity in the past, and really trying to understand what some of their barriers are. And as Agatha said, some of the biggest barriers are cultural, related to stigmatization around poverty, stigmatization and shame around asking for help, as well as barriers to transportation, barriers to knowing how to cook yourself a good meal, for example. So that's where this project and many others emerged from. The economic piece is actually just one of the lovely results of the collaboration that was had. We had participation and support from the United Counties, where their economic relaunch report tells us that the hospitality industry is one of the hardest hit industries in our region. It's no surprise. We're not, I'm getting my takeout, but I'm not able to go into restaurants and really support as much as I would usually. So we heard that a lot of catering companies and restaurants and cooks are looking for work and looking to provide their staff with work as well. So part of this program was working with 3 restaurants and chefs and caterers across the region, including Group Convex, which is a social enterprise which works with adults with disabilities and learning challenges. And the feedback that we've heard from them on, not only was I able to hire my staff back, but they're also able to get out of their house. They're no longer isolated. They're back in our community. Sorry, I'm getting like shivers up my spine about how wonderful it is to hear those stories and to know that we're all connected and we're all collaborating and helping each other with food and community through this project.
What a lovely story to end this edition of TVC News. If you want to hear a little more from these interviews or any of the ones in our previous programs, you can watch most of them in a longer format on our YouTube channel. We're also actively looking for volunteers and civilian journalists. So if you're interested in taking up a hobby locally, get in touch, as we'd love to have you. If you've got a news story idea, then please get in touch with me as well. You can reach me by nouvelle with an S at the end at tvc22.ca or by phone at 613-446-6037, extension number 4. Or of course, find us on any of our social media channels. As always, have a lovely weekend, Clarence-Rockland. We're out of this lockdown very soon, so let's just get through it together, and I'll catch you next week. Goodbye.